The autumn sun hung low over New Mexico territory in 1878 as Marcus Calloway sat on his weathered cabin porch. At 43, his face bore the deep lines of a man who had seen too much and forgiven himself too little. In his calloused hands, he held a yellowed letter, its paper softened by countless readings. His wife Sarah had written it in 1875, weeks before the plague took her. Her words spoke of forgiveness, of second chance, of the man she believed he could become. An old voice spoke from beyond the scene. Marcus himself at 75 in 1910, looking back across the decades. There are decisions that shape the entire course of a life. For me, it was the day I chose not to turn away. In autumn 1878, I was 43 years old enough to know regret, but still young enough to do something about it. Marcus folded the letter and walked to his horse. He had planned to hunt deer for winter supplies. Solitude had been his companion so long, he had almost forgotten what it meant to need another human being. The ride through high desert was quiet until the smell reached him. Smoke, acrid and wrong. Not a cooking fire, but the bitter stench of destruction. Marcus scanned the horizon. A thin column of dark smoke rose 2 miles distant. Every instinct screamed at him to ride away, but Sarah's words echoed, "You cannot run forever. Someday you must stand still and face what you've been running from." He urged his horse forward. The Apache camp appeared like a wound in the landscape. 8 bodies lay where they had fallen, men from teenage to elder. Lodges burned, belongings scattered. Marcus read the ground with practiced eyes. 6 or 7 attackers in military boots. Attack happened 4 hours earlier. No women's bodies, no children. That detail settled like stone in his gut. He knelt beside the cold fire pit, pressed fingers into ash. Still warm beneath. Small footprints led away into scrub forest. Running prints, made in terror. A memory struck like a physical blow. Cedar Valley, 1863. Marcus at 28, working as Army Scout for the 7th Cavalry. His job, find Apache camps, lead soldiers to them. Major William Morgan had stood overlooking a peaceful settlement of 40 people, mostly women and children. "Confirm this is the hostile Apache base," Morgan had ordered. "But sir," Marcus had said, "I only see villagers, no weapons." "The orders are clear, Calloway. Eliminate all Apache groups, no exceptions. These are women and children. Apache children become warriors. Apache women birth warriors. Understand?" Marcus had understood. He had stayed silent when he should have spoken. For 20 minutes, he watched the world turn red and screaming. One image burned forever, a young woman clutching a 10-year-old girl, trying to shield the child. Sergeant Thomas Briggs shot them both. Before dying, the woman looked at Marcus with devastating disappointment, as if watching goodness die in him. 2 weeks later, Marcus refused to guide another sweep. Morgan threatened court-martial. Marcus had replied, "If you want more blood, find it yourself." That night, Marcus rode out. Morgan sent 5 men after him, led by Briggs. Marcus led them into White Sands Desert and vanished, leaving them without maps or adequate water. Morgan died there. 2 others as well. Briggs and 2 men survived by doing the unspeakable. When they stumbled back, half mad, they reported Marcus had betrayed and murdered Major Morgan. The Army branded him deserter. For 15 years, Marcus had been a ghost. The sound of movement snapped him to the present. He drew his rifle smoothly. 4 women emerged from behind a boulder, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. The first woman stood ahead, tall with braids streaked with silver despite her 39 years. Elena Ravenswood, widow of the chief. Her eyes held grief and steel. The second was smaller, younger. Clara Whitestone, 29, wrists wrapped in bloody bandages, pregnant belly subtle but visible. She swayed, running on will alone. The third kept her distance, hand near a knife. Sarah Blackwood, 33, hair cut short, body angled to bolt or fight. She had been attacked by white men before. The fourth moved with quiet competence. Rebecca Stonewater, 36, strongly built, a former medicine woman with scarred healer's hands. Marcus stopped 10 paces away, hands raised and empty. "I don't mean harm. I saw your camp was attacked." Sarah's hand tightened on her knife. "So what will you do? Ride away like every white man would?" "No, I'll help you reach safety." Elena stepped forward, studying him. Wayupa, we're nothing to you. Because 15 years ago I didn't act when I should have. I won't make that mistake again. Something fell from his coat, a tarnished metal badge. Nim. Callaway, Scout, 7th Cavalry, 1863. Sarah snatched it. You're military. You slaughter our people. I was, but I quit after Cedar Valley. Elena went still. Cedar Valley? You were there? Marcus nodded, meeting her gaze with visible guilt. I guided them. That's why I left the army. I couldn't live with what I'd helped them do. Rebecca's practical voice cut through tension. Whatever he was, Clara needs water and shelter now. We'll die here when darkness comes. Elena looked at Marcus, then the women. Where can you take us? I have a homestead 4 days north. Timber fence, good well, stored food. You can stay until you find better. Or stay permanently. Sarah's eyes narrowed. And if this is a trap, then I've had 10 easier opportunities to hurt you. I haven't taken any. I won't start now. After a long moment, Elena nodded. They began walking as sun descended. Marcus helped Clara lean on his shoulder. Rebecca and Sarah carried salvaged possessions. Elena walked last, constantly looking back. After 2 hours, Marcus climbed a rise to scan their trail. What he saw chilled his blood. 3 miles behind, a campfire flickered. Too large, too careless. Whoever lit it wanted to be seen. Someone's following us. How many? Sarah asked. Hard to say, but they're not hiding. They want us to know they're there. To frighten us? Elena asked. Or drive us somewhere specific. Rebecca examined Clara's wrists again. These cuts are too clean, too precise. Not from fighting. Someone cut her deliberately to slow us down. Elena's eyes widened. They want us moving slowly, following a route. This isn't random pursuit. Marcus felt pieces falling into place. Who would set such a trap? Clara spoke, voice barely audible. Before he cut me, he asked where Thomas had hidden something. He said if I told him, he'd let me live. What did he want? Marcus asked gently. I don't know. Thomas never told me. Elena turned to Marcus. Was there anyone who'd track you for 15 years? Sergeant Thomas Briggs. He swore he'd kill me. If he wanted you, why attack our camp? Rebecca asked. Because he knew I wouldn't ignore people in need. He used you as bait. Sarah's anger flared. Our families died to draw you out? I didn't know, but yes, that's probably what happened. Elena moved between them. Fighting won't help. If Briggs wants Marcus, he'll kill all of us. We survive together or die separately. Rebecca nodded. We share this danger now. As night fell, the group settled into uneasy rest. Marcus took first watch. Elena approached quietly. The woman at Cedar Valley holding the child. What did she look like? Marcus closed his eyes. Long black hair, about 25. Small scar here. He touched his cheek. Child was 10. Dark eyes, blue dress. Elena's tears began flowing. That was my sister Catherine and my niece Anna. I didn't know they were at Cedar Valley until after. Marcus felt something break inside. I'm so sorry. I should have done something. But you didn't. No, I've lived with that failure every day. Elena wiped tears. Why did you leave the army? Marcus told everything. About refusing another massacre. Morgan's threats, leading Briggs and others into desert, leaving them to die of thirst. Morgan died. 2 others. But Briggs survived with Red Morrison and Cole Webster. They survived by eating the dead. When they returned, they reported I'd betrayed and murdered Morgan. I've been running since, and Briggs is following us now, I'm certain. 15 years of hatred growing like poison. Just before dawn, Marcus found fresh tracks near their camp. Someone had crept close during night, observing, assessing, herding them towards some destination. We need to move now, Clara stumbled as they gathered belongings. Rebecca caught her mirror. She can't keep this pace, Rebecca said quietly. The pregnancy, injury, shock. She needs days of rest. 2 more days to the homestead. Can she make it? She'll have to. After 4 hours hard walking, they reached flat ground. In the distance, the dark line of Willow Creek Canyon. Fastest route, but most dangerous. Once inside, only one way in and out. That canyon is our best route, Marcus said, but also where Briggs expects us. If we enter, we're committed. Is there another way? Elena asked. Yes, but 3 days longer. Clara doesn't have 3 days. Clara met their eyes. I can make it. Don't slow down for me. Sarah moved to her side. We won't leave you. If you fall, we carry you. They approached the canyon mouth. Marcus examined the ground. Fresh tracks, single horse ridden by someone quiet, made within 2 hours, led into canyon. Someone's already in there, waiting. Elena studied the tracks. One rider? One we can see, could be more hidden. So it's a trap, Sarah said. Most likely, but still our fastest route. If Clara collapses in the open, we're finished. So we go through, Elena said, but carefully. They entered single file. Canyon walls rose 200 feet. Marcus taught them to walk close to walls where stone wouldn't echo. Clara leaned on Rebecca and Sarah, alternating. Halfway through, Marcus spotted dried blood on stone, a trail of drops leading deeper. Someone wounded came through here. Within a day, they followed cautiously to a small overhang. More blood, torn fabric bandages, scratched into stone with a knife. Calloway, Briggs is coming for you. Marcus's breath caught. Daniel Hawthorne, his oldest friend from Army days. You know who wrote this? Elena asked. A friend I thought was dead. Hoofbeats echoed from behind. Multiple horses, into the crevice. They squeezed into a narrow split. 3 riders appeared on the rim 200 feet above. Marcus recognized Sergeant Thomas Briggs immediately. 50 now, lean and hard, face scarred. With him, Red Morrison and Cole Webster. Briggs's voice boomed down. Calloway, I know you're there. 15 years, Marcus, you left us to die. Major Morgan died screaming for water. You betrayed everything a man should stand for. A rifle shot cracked. Cole Webster fell from his horse. Ambush, Briggs shouted. A weak voice called from the opposite wall. Marcus, it's me. Run. This time I'll help you. Daniel Hawthorne. Marcus, we have to go. Elena gripped his arm. Now. But Daniel's giving us a chance. Don't waste it. They ran through canyon, Clara half carried. Behind them, shots echoed as Daniel kept Briggs pinned. Each shot felt like farewell. They burst into a wide basin. No cover for 200 yards. The tree line, Marcus pointed. Go! They ran until reaching pine forest. Clara collapsed, gasping. Rebecca examined her, face grave. She's bleeding. The baby needs complete rest or we'll lose both. Marcus looked back. But Briggs will find us anyway, Elena said. We need to make a stand. Marcus scouted, found a defensible clearing with a spring. They settled Clara there as darkness fell. I have to go back for Daniel, Marcus said quietly. Are you insane? Sarah demanded. Daniel saved our lives. I won't leave him. Elena studied him, then nodded. We'll wait, but promise you'll come back. Marcus handed Elena his pistol. If I'm not back by dawn, head north. 3 days to my homestead. Rock shaped like an eagle at the gate, the old voice spoke again. Sometimes a man must choose between safety and honor. Daniel had sacrificed himself for me. If I abandoned him, I'd be no different than the man who stood silent at Cedar Valley. This time I would not run. Marcus slipped into darkness toward the canyon where his friend waited, where his past waited, where perhaps his redemption waited. The night swallowed him whole, and the 4 women were left alone with their fears, their hopes, and terrible uncertainty of whether they would ever see him again. Marcus moved through the darkness like a shadow, every sense heightened by years of survival on the frontier. The canyon loomed ahead, its black mouth seeming to swallow even starlight. He had left the women behind, left safety behind, driven by something stronger than fear. Debt, honor, the ghost of the man he used to be before Cedar Valley stole his soul. The climb up the canyon wall was treacherous in darkness. Each handhold had to be tested, each footfall placed with absolute precision. One mistake would send him tumbling 200 feet to the rocky floor below. But Marcus had climbed worse in worse conditions. His body remembered what his mind tried to forget. 45 minutes of careful ascent brought him to the ledge where he had seen Daniel's muzzle flash. He found his friend lying behind a boulder, the rifle still clutched in hands gone slack. Even in moonlight, Marcus could see the extent of Daniel's injuries. The shoulder wound had bled through makeshift bandages, soaking his shirt black. His skin held the waxy pallor of someone who had lost too much blood. His breathing came shallow and labored. Daniel's eyes opened as Marcus knelt beside him. Recognition flickered, followed by something like relief. Marcus. His voice was barely a whisper. You're still alive. Marcus pulled off his own shirt, began pressing it against the wound to slow the bleeding. Thanks to you. How did you find me? I've been tracking Briggs for 6 months. He was planning something, setting a trap for you. I tried to warn you, but arrived too late. You should have stayed away. Now you're dying because of me. Daniel managed a weak smile. 15 years ago, you saved my life at Cedar Valley when you refused to shoot into that crowd. I was standing right next to you, remember? Morgan ordered us both to fire. You refused. That gave me courage to refuse too. Now I repay the debt. Marcus felt tears burn his eyes. You don't owe me anything. Everyone owes something to someone. Daniel coughed, blood flecking his lips. Listen carefully, I don't have much time. Briggs isn't just hunting you for revenge. There's something else. Something he needs. What? Before Morgan died in that desert, he gave Briggs a metal box, told him it contained insurance, proof of things that could destroy careers, reputations, lives. What kind of proof? Daniel's breathing grew more labored. Morgan kept detailed records. Every massacre we participated in, 23 operations over 2 years, not just Cedar Valley, everyone reported as battles against warriors. Lies. The truth is in that box. Photographs, lists of names, officers who gave orders. If it ever surfaces, dozens of high-ranking men will hang. Marcus felt cold spread through his chest. Why didn't Briggs destroy it? Because Morgan told him to use it for leverage. Blackmail, money. Briggs hid it somewhere only he knows. But he's terrified someone else will find it first. Who else knows about it? Me. Daniel's eyes were starting to lose focus. And maybe someone in that Apache camp he attacked. Before Briggs raided them, one of the men there found something. A box matching Morgan's description. Hidden near Black Creek, 2 miles from their camp. Marcus's mind raced. That's why Briggs attacked them. Not to draw me out. To find the box. Both. You were an unexpected bonus. Daniel gripped Marcus's hand with surprising strength. You have to find it. The box. Get it to the authorities. Let the truth come out. That's the only way to make Cedar Valley mean something. Before Marcus could respond, the sound of sliding gravel came from below. Someone was climbing toward them. Daniel heard it too. Go. Leave me. I'm not leaving you to die alone. Then we'll both die. Daniel pushed at him weakly. Please, let my death mean something. The climbing sounds grew closer. Multiple people now. Promise me, Daniel whispered. Find the box. Tell the truth. For all of them. For Catherine and Anna. For everyone. Marcus hesitated, torn between honor and survival. Then he heard Briggs's voice drifting up through the darkness. I know you're up there, Calloway. You and that traitor Hawthorne. Come down peacefully, and I'll make it quick. Daniel's hand found Marcus's face, turned it so their eyes met. Go. Live. Finish this. That's an order from a superior officer. Despite everything, Marcus almost smiled. You were never my superior. I outranked you by 2 grades. Now follow orders for once in your miserable life. The climbing sounds were very close now. Marcus gripped Daniel's hand one final time, then moved quickly to the far edge of the ledge. A narrow crevice led down the opposite side of the canyon, away from the climbers. He slipped into it just as Red Morrison's head appeared over the rim. From his hidden position, Marcus watched Morrison and Cole Webster pull themselves onto the ledge. Webster's shoulder was bandaged where Daniel had shot him, his face twisted with pain and rage. Where's Calloway? Morrison demanded, pointing his rifle at Daniel. Gone. Daniel's voice was fading. You're too late. Webster kicked him savagely. Where did he go? Daniel looked up at them with eyes that held no fear, only contempt. To places better men than you will never reach. Webster raised his rifle. Then you're no use to us. Wait, Briggs's voice came from below, climbing toward them. Don't kill him yet. He knows where the box is. Briggs pulled himself onto the ledge, breathing hard. Even in moonlight, Marcus could see the madness burning in his former sergeant's eyes. 15 years of hatred and desperation had transformed him into something barely human. Briggs knelt beside Daniel, studying him with cold assessment. You're dying, Lieutenant. No point in protecting secrets now. Where is Morgan's box? Daniel smiled, blood on his teeth. Somewhere you'll never find it. Briggs hit him across the face. The box! Morgan told you where he hid it before he died? I know he did. He told me many things. Daniel's voice was growing fainter. About you, about what kind of man follows orders to murder children, about what kind of man survives by eating his comrade's flesh. Briggs's face contorted with rage. We did what we had to. You would have done the same. No. Daniel's eyes found the crevice where Marcus hid. Some of us choose to die as men rather than live as monsters. In one savage motion, Briggs drew his knife and plunged it into Daniel's chest. The old lieutenant gasped once, then went still. His eyes remained open, staring at the stars. Marcus pressed his fist against his mouth to keep from crying out. Rage and grief warred inside him, but he forced himself to remain silent, hidden. Daniel had bought his escape with blood. He would not waste it. Check his pockets, Briggs ordered. Maps, notes, anything. Morrison and Webster searched the body thoroughly. They found nothing useful. Briggs stood, frustration evident in every line of his body. Calloway's heading back to those women. They know something. The Apache man who found the box must have told someone before we killed him. Maybe his wife. That pregnant one. Clara, Marcus thought. They would torture her for information she didn't have. Briggs turned to his men. We go down, track them to wherever they're hiding. When we find them, we take the pregnant woman alive. Kill the others if they resist. And when we find Calloway, I want him breathing long enough to watch what I do to those women. Then I'll kill him slowly. The three men began descending the way they had come. Marcus waited until their sounds faded, then emerged from the crevice. He approached Daniel's body, closed the staring eyes gently. I promise, he whispered. I'll find the box. I'll tell the truth. You won't have died for nothing. He took Daniel's rifle and ammunition, then began the dangerous descent down the opposite side of the canyon. By the time he reached the bottom, false dawn was beginning to pale the eastern sky. He ran through the darkness toward the forest where four women waited, hoping desperately that Briggs had not reached them first. The clearing appeared unchanged as Marcus approached. He gave the bird call signal he had taught Elena before leaving. Her answering whistle came immediately, filled with relief. He found them awake and watchful. Clara lay near the spring, Rebecca tending her. Sarah stood guard with a heavy branch as a weapon. Elena met Marcus at the clearing's edge. Daniel, she asked, though his expression already gave the answer. Dead. Briggs killed him. Marcus's voice was flat, drained of emotion. But he told me something crucial first, about why Briggs is really hunting us. He gathered them close and explained everything. The box of evidence, Morgan's records of massacres, the 23 operations disguised as battles, the photographs and names that could hang generals. Briggs thinks someone in your camp found the box, Marcus finished. That's why he attacked, to recover it before anyone could expose the truth. Clara, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. Her voice was weak but clear. Marcus, you don't need to search for the boss. I know where it is. Everyone turned to stare at her. My husband Thomas found it, Clara continued, near Black Creek, 2 miles from our camp. A metal box buried under a heart-shaped rock by the oldest willow tree. He brought it home, opened it. Inside was a journal, photographs, terrible things. He planned to take it to Fort Union and report what he found. But before he could, our camp was attacked. Sarah moved closer to her sister. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because I was afraid. Thomas warned me to tell no one. And I thought if they didn't know I knew, they might let me live. Rebecca's practical mind worked through the implications. So Briggs attacked your camp looking for the box. When he didn't find it, he decided to use you as bait, follow you assuming you'd eventually lead him to it. And Marcus appearing was just fortunate timing for him, Elena added. He could eliminate a personal enemy and recover the evidence. Marcus knelt beside Clara. You're certain this is what Briggs wants? You're sure your husband found Morgan's box? Clara nodded. Thomas described it exactly. Metal box with brass lock, initials WM engraved on top. Inside, a leather journal filled with names and dates. 47 photographs. Lists of officers involved. How did Briggs know Thomas found it? Marcus asked. There was a traitor in our camp. Clara's voice broke. Jacob Running Deer, Thomas's closest friend. He owed gambling debts, needed money. Briggs paid him to watch Thomas. When Jacob saw Thomas digging up the box, he rode straight to Briggs and told him. Sarah's face hardened with fury. That bastard! He died in the attack, didn't he? No, Clara met her eyes. I saw him slip away just before the attack began. He gave Briggs the signal, then ran like the coward he was. So Briggs orchestrated everything, Rebecca said. Planted a spy, waited for the box to be found, then attacked to retrieve it. When the attack failed to recover the box, he used us as trackers to lead him to it. And now he knows we're close, Marcus added grimly. He'll come for Clara specifically. She's the only link to the box's location. Then we can't stay here. Elena stood decisive. We move before dawn fully breaks. Clara can't walk, Rebecca protested. Not far, not fast. Then we make our stand. Sarah's voice was cold as winter. Here, now. We have weapons, we have position, and we have nothing left to lose. Before Marcus could respond, the crack of a rifle shot shattered the morning quiet. The bullet struck a tree trunk inches from Marcus's head, bark exploding in a shower of splinters. Another shot, another, coming from 3 different directions. They're surrounding us, Marcus shouted. Into the trees, spread out. The group scattered into the forest as bullets tore through the clearing. Marcus caught a glimpse of Red Morrison advancing from the east, rifle raised. Cole Webster circled from the west, despite his wounded shoulder. And Briggs came straight up the middle, firing methodically. Marcus returned fire, forcing Morrison to take cover. Elena and Sarah flanked left and right, using the trees for protection. Rebecca stayed with Clara, shielding her with her own body. Calloway! Briggs's voice rang through the trees. Trees. Give us the pregnant woman and the box location. The others can live. Marcus knew it was a lie. Briggs would kill them all to silence witnesses. He aimed carefully at Morrison's position and fired. The big man cursed and fell back. Sarah darted between trees with her knife, getting close to Webster's position. The wounded man saw her coming and swung his rifle around, but Sarah was faster. She launched herself at him, knife flashing. Webster went down with a scream. One down, Sarah called out. Morrison, enraged at his partner's fall, broke from cover, charging directly at Marcus. The 2 men collided with brutal force. Marcus's rifle went flying. They grappled hand to hand, Morrison's superior size giving him advantage. He slammed Marcus against a tree trunk, driving the air from his lungs. Elena appeared from the side, swinging a thick branch with all her strength. It connected with Morrison's skull with a sickening crack. The big man staggered, his grip loosening. Marcus drove his knee into Morrison's gut and struck him across the jaw. Morrison collapsed unconscious. 2 down, Marcus gasped. Where's Briggs? A voice came from behind them, cold and triumphant. Right here. They turned to find Briggs standing at the edge of the clearing, his rifle aimed directly at Rebecca and Clara. He had circled around during the fight, cutting off their escape. Drop your weapons, Briggs ordered. All of you. Or I put a bullet through the medicine woman's head, then the pregnant girl's belly. Marcus, Elena, and Sarah slowly lowered their weapons. That's better. Briggs moved closer, keeping his rifle steady. Now, the pregnant one is going to tell me exactly where that box is hidden. Every detail. And if I think she's lying, people start dying. Clara struggled to sit up, Rebecca supporting her. Her face was pale, but her eyes held unexpected steel. I'll tell you, she said quietly, but first answer me something. Why kill so many innocent people just to hide the truth? Briggs laughed, a sound without humor. Innocent? There are no innocents in war, girl, only winners and losers. And I'm not going to lose everything I've built just because some dead major kept records he should have burned. Those records prove you murdered children, Elena said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. Families, elders, people who never raised a weapon. They were Apache, Briggs said flatly, as if that explained everything. As if it justified everything. My sister was Apache, Elena continued, stepping forward despite the rifle aimed in her direction. Catherine Ravenswood, Cedar Valley, 1863. She was 25 years old. She died trying to protect her daughter, my niece Anna. 10 years old. Do you remember them? Do you remember pulling the trigger? Briggs's face showed nothing. Not guilt, not recognition, just cold emptiness. I remember doing my duty, following orders, same as every soldier who ever wore the uniform. Marcus found his voice, rough with emotion. No, not every soldier. Some of us chose to stop. Some of us couldn't live with what we'd become. And look where that choice got you, Briggs sneered. 15 years running, 15 years alone. Was it worth it, Calloway? All that precious morality? Marcus met his eyes steadily. Yes, because I can still look at myself in a mirror. Can you? For just a moment, something flickered in Briggs's expression. Doubt? Shame? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by hardened resolve. The box, he demanded, turning back to Clara. Where is it? Clara took a shaky breath. Black Creek, 2 miles northeast of where our camp was. There's a grove of old willow trees. The largest one has a heart-shaped rock at its base on the south side. The box is buried 2 feet down, wrapped in oilcloth. Briggs studied her face, searching for deception. You're certain? My husband showed me. Made me memorize every detail in case something happened to him. She closed her eyes. He said if good people knew the truth, it might prevent future massacres. He died believing that truth mattered. Truth, Briggs spat the word like poison. Truth is whatever the winners say it is, and I'm going to win. He raised his rifle, aiming at Marcus's chest. No, Elena threw herself forward, but she was too far away. The shot never came. Instead, a voice rang out from the trees behind Briggs. Drop the weapon! Now a figure emerged from the forest. A young Apache man, perhaps 25, wearing buckskin and carrying a Winchester rifle aimed steadily at Briggs's back. His face bore paint in the traditional warrior style. Jacob Running Deer? Sarah breathed in shock. You're alive? The young man's expression was conflicted, shame and determination warring in his eyes. I'm alive, but I'm done running. He took another step forward. Drop the rifle, white man, or I'll drop you. Briggs tensed, calculating. You're the spy, the one who sold out his own people for gold. I was, Jacob's voice cracked, and I'll carry that shame to my grave. But maybe I can start to make it right, starting now. You don't have the courage, Briggs said. You ran once, you'll run again. Maybe. Jacob's rifle didn't waver, but not today. The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Briggs made his move, spinning toward Jacob with inhuman speed. Both rifles fired simultaneously. Jacob staggered back, blood blooming on his chest. But his shot had struck true. Briggs dropped his rifle, clutching his side where blood seeped between his fingers. For a moment, no one moved. Then Marcus lunged forward, kicking Briggs's rifle away. Elena and Sarah rushed to Jacob, lowering him gently to the ground. Rebecca stayed with Clara, checking frantically to ensure the pregnant woman hadn't been hit by stray fire. Jacob looked up at Sarah with eyes already glazing. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry for what I did. For Thomas. For everyone. Sarah, who had every right to hate him, took his hand. You came back. That's what matters. Jacob's breath rattled. The box, his eyes found Marcus. Get it. Show the world. Make sure they died for something. We will, Marcus promised. Jacob smiled faintly, then went still. Sarah closed his eyes gently, tears streaming down her face. He was my brother's friend. We grew up together, and he died trying to be that good man again. Briggs, still alive but badly wounded, laughed bitterly from where he lay. Sentimental fools, all of you. That box won't change anything. The army will bury it. The officers will deny everything. You're fighting a war you can't win. Marcus stood over him. Maybe, but at least we'll fight it. That's more than you can say. Elena knelt beside Briggs, her face a mask of controlled emotion. You killed my sister, my niece, hundreds of others, and you feel nothing. No remorse, no shame. Briggs met her eyes. I did what I was told, same as every soldier. No. Elena's voice was steel. Soldiers have honor. You're just a murderer hiding behind a uniform. She stood, turning her back on him. Let's tie him up. We'll take him and the evidence to Fort Union. Let the authorities decide his fate. As they bound Briggs and his wounded men, the first full rays of sunrise broke through the trees, painting the clearing in gold and shadow. The night of violence was over. The longer journey toward justice was just beginning. The old voice spoke again, Marcus at 75, looking back. That morning, bleeding and exhausted in a forest clearing, we made a choice not to become like those who hurt us, not to answer cruelty with cruelty, Elena showed me that strength isn't about domination. It's about choosing mercy even when vengeance would be easier, especially then. Marcus looked at the four women, at the bodies of friends and enemies, at the blood that had been spilled in pursuit of truth. "We need to move," he said quietly. "Get to Black Creek before anyone else comes looking. Recover the box, then ride for Fort Union." Elena nodded. "Together?" "Together," Marcus confirmed. And so they began the final leg of their journey, carrying the wounded, burying the dead, and bearing the weight of evidence that would shake the foundations of military power. Behind them, the sun continued to rise. Ahead, the path remained uncertain. But they walked it together, and that made all the difference. The journey to Black Creek took longer than Marcus had hoped. Clara's condition worsened with each mile, forcing frequent stops. Rebecca worked tirelessly to keep the young woman stable, using what herbs she could find to ease the pain and slow the bleeding. But everyone knew they were racing against time, and time was winning. Briggs, Morrison, and Webster were bound and forced to walk ahead of the group, their hands tied and a rope connecting them in a line. Briggs remained silent, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. The wound in his side had been bandaged, but continued to seep blood. Morrison stumbled frequently, his head injury from Elena's blow leaving him disoriented. Webster whimpered with each step, his shoulder wound festering despite Rebecca's ministrations. Sarah walked behind the prisoners, her knife visible at her belt, eyes promising death if any of them tried to escape. The hatred in her gaze never wavered. These men had killed her husband and children. Only Marcus's insistence on justice over vengeance kept her blade sheathed. The landscape shifted as they traveled northeast. The pine forest gave way to scrubland dotted with juniper and sage. Rocky outcroppings rose like ancient sentinels, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. The sun climbed higher, turning the October morning warm despite the season. Marcus led the way, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. They were exposed out here, visible for miles. If anyone else was looking for that box, if Briggs had sent word to other former soldiers, they could be walking into another ambush. Elena walked beside him, matching his pace. She had proven herself a natural leader, keeping the group organized and focused despite exhaustion and grief. Marcus found himself watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice. There was something remarkable about her strength, not the loud bravado of men trying to prove themselves, but the quiet endurance of someone who had survived the unsurvivable and kept walking anyway. "Tell me about your homestead," she said quietly. "What's it like?" Marcus considered the question. "Small, simple. Timber cabin with 2 rooms. Garden plot that grows corn and squash when I remember to tend it. Spring-fed creek for water. Enough land to graze a few horses. Sounds lonely." "It was. Is." He paused. "I built it to be lonely. Thought that's what I deserved. And now I'm not sure what I deserve. But I know I don't want to be alone anymore." Elena glanced at him, something soft in her expression. "Good. Because those women back there, they're going to need a place to heal, to rebuild, and I think you need the same thing." Before Marcus could respond, Rebecca called out from behind. Clara's collapsed. "We need to stop." They found what shelter they could beneath an overhang of red rock. Clara lay unconscious, her breathing shallow and rapid. Rebecca checked her pulse, examined the bleeding, then looked up with worry etched deep in her face. "The baby's in distress. If we don't get her to a real doctor soon, we'll lose them both." "How long can she last?" Marcus asked. "Hours, maybe a day if we're lucky." Rebecca's voice was grim, but every step we force her to take speeds up the process. Elena knelt beside Clara, brushing hair from the young woman's fevered forehead. "Then we don't force her to take steps. We make a travois, drag her if we have to. That'll slow us down even more," Sarah pointed out. "Then we slow down." Elena's tone left no room for argument. "We don't leave anyone behind. Not anymore." Marcus fashioned a travois from branches and rope, creating a simple stretcher they could drag behind his horse. They settled Clara onto it as gently as possible. She stirred briefly, eyes fluttering open. "The baby," she whispered. "Please save the baby." "We'll save you both," Rebecca promised, though her eyes told a different story. They pressed on, the travois making harsh scraping sounds as it moved across rocky ground. Progress slowed to a crawl. What should have taken 3 hours stretched to 5. The sun passed its zenith, and began its descent toward the western horizon. Briggs, sensing their desperation, finally broke his silence. "You're going to lose her. The pregnant one. She'll die out here, and her baby with her. All because you're too stubborn to admit defeat." Marcus didn't break stride. "Keep walking. I'm trying to help you see reason. Let me go. Take the woman to Fort Union for medical care. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." Elena laughed without humor. "You must think we're fools. The moment we release you, you'd hunt us down and finish what you started." "Maybe." Briggs's voice took on a different quality, almost reasonable. "Or maybe I'm just tired. Tired of running. Tired of fighting. Tired of being the monster everyone thinks I am." "You are a monster, Saraspat. You murdered children." "I followed orders," Briggs shot back. But there was something in his voice now, a crack in the armor. Something that might have been doubt or shame or the first glimmer of human conscience breaking through years of hardened justification. Marcus stopped, turning to face his old sergeant. "You keep saying that, following orders, like it absolves you of everything. But we both know the truth, Briggs. Orders don't pull triggers. Men do. And every time you pulled that trigger, you made a choice." Briggs met his gaze, and for a moment the two men simply stared at each other. 15 years of history hung between them. Betrayals and survival, blood and desert sun, the screams of the innocent and the silence of the guilty. "You think you're better than me," Briggs finally said. "But you're not. You guided us to those camps. You made the massacres possible. The blood is on your hands too, Calloway." "I know." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "I know exactly what I did. That's why I left. That's why I've spent 15 years trying to make amends. And that's why I'm going to make sure the truth comes out, even if it means destroying my own reputation along with yours." Something shifted in Briggs's expression. Not quite understanding, but perhaps the beginning of it. They reached Black Creek as the sun touched the western hills. The stream was narrow but clear, flowing over smooth stones worn round by centuries of water. Willow trees grew thick along its banks, their long branches trailing in the current like green hair. Marcus helped lower Clara from the trottoir. Her condition had deteriorated further. She barely responded when Rebecca spoke to her, her skin hot with fever. "This is the place," Elena said, studying the grove of willows. "But which tree?" "There are dozens." Clara said the largest one, Marcus reminded them, with a heart-shaped rock at the base on the south side. They spread out, searching. The light was fading fast, and shadows pooled beneath the trees like dark water. Sarah found it first, calling out softly. The willow was ancient, its trunk gnarled and thick, branches spreading in a canopy 30 feet wide. At its southern base, half buried in soil and leaves, a stone the rough shape of a heart. Marcus knelt and began digging with his hands. The earth was soft here, rich and dark. 2 feet down, his fingers struck something hard wrapped in oilcloth. His heart pounded as he pulled it free. The metal box was smaller than he expected, perhaps 12 inches long and 8 inches wide. The brass lock was corroded but intact, engraved on the lid in elegant script, W.M. William Morgan. Elena knelt beside him. "Open it." Marcus tried the lock. It held firm, years of rust making it stubborn. He drew his knife and worked the blade into the mechanism. After several tense minutes, the lock gave way with a reluctant click. He opened the box. Inside, wrapped in more oilcloth to protect against moisture, lay the evidence Daniel had died for. Jacob had died for. That hundreds of innocent people had unknowingly died to create. The journal was bound in black leather, Morgan's name embossed on the cover. Marcus opened it with trembling hands. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, dates and locations meticulously recorded. Each entry detailed an operation. Target identified, forces deployed, results achieved. Except the targets weren't warriors or threats. They were families, villages, people guilty only of existing in land that others wanted. Cedar Valley appeared on page 17. Marcus read the entry aloud, his voice hollow. September 12, 1863. Operation conducted against hostile Apache settlement in Cedar Valley region. 43 enemy combatants eliminated. No casualties sustained by our forces. Recommend commendation for Sergeant Briggs for efficiency of execution. Elena's hand covered her mouth. 43 enemy combatants. They were counting my sister, my niece, everyone. Marcus continued through the journal. 23 operations over 2 years, each one a lie translated into official record, each one a massacre dressed up as a battle. The photographs were worse. Soldiers posing with bodies, villages burning. In several images, Marcus recognized younger versions of Briggs, Morrison, Webster. In one, he saw himself standing at the edge of frame, looking away from the camera, looking away from the carnage, always looking away when he should have been acting. The final items in the box were lists, officers who had authorized the operations, politicians who had approved the funding, contractors who had profited from the cleared land, a web of corruption and murder stretching far beyond Major Morgan and his immediate command. This is bigger than we thought, Marcus said quietly. This implicates senators, generals, probably goes all the way to Washington. All the more reason to expose it, Elena replied. The bigger they are, the harder they must fall. A sound made them all freeze. Hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching from the east, moving fast. Company, Sarah hissed, her hand going to her knife. Marcus quickly closed the box and shoved it back into the hole, covering it with loose dirt. We can't let anyone take this. Not until we reach Fort Union. They took defensive positions among the willows. Briggs, still bound, opened his mouth to shout a warning. Elena's knife was at his throat before he could make a sound. One word and you die here, she promised. The riders emerged from the twilight. 6 men on horseback, dressed in a mixture of military surplus and civilian clothes. They had the look of veterans who had stayed in the territory after their service ended, men who knew violence and wore it comfortably. The leader was a thin man with a colonel's bearing, despite his lack of uniform. He surveyed the creek bank with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Evening travelers, his voice was cultured, Eastern educated, dangerous in its politeness. We're looking for some friends of ours, Sergeant Briggs and his companions. You wouldn't have seen them, would you? Marcus stepped out from the willows, rifle held casually but ready. Who's asking? Colonel Raymond Pierce. Retired. And you are? Just passing through. Pierce's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Though I notice you have prisoners tied up behind you, one of whom looks remarkably like Sergeant Briggs. He tried to rob us. We're taking him to Fort Union for the authorities to handle. How civic-minded. Pierce dismounted slowly, his men following suit. The problem is, Sergeant Briggs works for me, has for several years now, and I'd very much like him back. He's wanted for murder and assault. Marcus kept his voice level. You're welcome to visit him in the stockade. I don't think you understand. Pierce's tone sharpened. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you to release him. Now. The 6 men fanned out, hands moving toward weapons. The tension stretched tight as a drawn bowstring. Elena emerged from the willows, followed by Sarah and Rebecca. 4 against 6, poor odds made worse by Clara's unconscious form and 3 bound prisoners. Pierce's eyebrows rose. Apache women, how interesting. And one appears to be pregnant. Briggs mentioned something about that in his last report. You must be the survivors from that unfortunate raid. Unfortunate, Sarah repeated, her voice dripping venom. You call the murder of our families unfortunate? Regrettable, then. Pierce's expression showed no regret whatsoever. War is messy, my dear. Innocent people die, but it's all in service of progress. Civilization. The taming of a wild land. Marcus understood with sickening clarity. This is about the land, isn't it? The operations weren't just military actions. They were clearing territory for someone to claim. Very perceptive. Pierce nodded approvingly. The Apache raids, real or imagined, provided excellent justification for military intervention. Once the natives were removed, the land became available for development. Mining, ranching, railroad expansion. Everyone profited, except the people you murdered. Every empire is built on bones, Mr. Calloway. Pierce had done his research, knew Marcus's name. The question is whether you want to add your bones to the foundation or step aside and let progress continue. Marcus thought of Daniel's dying words, of Jacob's redemption purchased with blood, of Elena's sister and niece, their lives reduced to entries in a false ledger, of every person cataloged in Morgan's journal as an enemy combatant when they were simply human beings trying to live. No, he said quietly. No more bones, no more lies. The truth comes out, all of it. Pierce sighed as if genuinely disappointed. Then I'm afraid this ends badly for you. His hand moved toward his pistol. Marcus's rifle was already rising. But before either man could fire, a new voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Everyone turned. Standing on a rise 50 yards away was a line of uniformed soldiers, real soldiers, not hired guns. A dozen men with Springfield rifles aimed down at Pierce and his crew. At their head stood a captain Marcus didn't recognize, young and serious, with the look of someone who took his duty seriously. Captain James Morrison, United States Army, Fort Union Garrison. Pierce stiffened. Captain, this is a civilian matter. No need for military involvement. I disagree. The captain rode forward, his men maintaining their positions. We received word that Sergeant Briggs, wanted for desertion and multiple murders, was in this area. We've been tracking him for 2 days. Imagine my surprise to find not just Briggs, but Colonel Pierce as well. Pierce's facade cracked slightly. I'm a civilian now, Captain. You have no authority over me. True, but I have authority over military deserters and war criminals, and witnesses who can testify about illegal operations conducted under military authority. The captain's eyes swept over Marcus, Elena, and the others. I believe these people have evidence that needs to be seen by the proper authorities. Marcus felt hope kindle for the first time in days. You'll take Briggs and his men into custody? Protect the evidence? I will. Captain Morrison dismounted, approaching with hand extended. And I'll make sure your testimony reaches people who will actually do something about it. Not everyone in the Army is corrupt, Mr. Calloway. Some of us still believe in honor. Pierce's men looked uncertain now, outnumbered and outgunned by legitimate military authority. Pierce himself seemed to be calculating odds and finding them unfavorable. This isn't over, he said quietly to Marcus. You understand that, don't you? I have friends in high places. They won't let this evidence see daylight. Maybe. Marcus met his gaze steadily. But we're going to try anyway, for everyone who can't speak for themselves anymore. Captain Morrison's men took Briggs, Morrison, and Webster into custody. They also detained Pierce and his crew for questioning. As darkness fell completely, the soldiers set up camp by the creek. Rebecca worked on Clara through the night, using the soldiers' medical supplies to stabilize her. The young woman's fever broke just before dawn. She would survive. So would her baby. Marcus sat by the fire, the metal box beside him. Elena joined him, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. Do you think it'll make a difference, she asked. The evidence, the testimony. Do you think anyone will care? I don't know, Marcus admitted. Pierce is right that powerful men will try to bury this. But Daniel died believing the truth mattered. Jacob came back because he believed people could change. I have to think they were right. Elena was silent for a moment. My sister Catherine, in your testimony, will you mention her by name? Will you tell them she was a real person, not just a number in a false report? I'll tell them everything. Every person I can remember, every face, every name. They'll know what was taken from them. Good. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. Then it's worth the fight. The old voice spoke again, Marcus at 75, looking back. That night by Black Creek, we found something more valuable than evidence. We found purpose. Elena taught me that bearing witness is its own form of justice, that speaking the names of the dead keeps them alive in the only way still possible, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to let the world forget. In the morning, Captain Morrison organized the journey to Fort Union. Clara traveled on a proper litter carried by soldiers. Briggs and the others rode in chains. Pierce maintained his dignified silence, already planning legal strategies. Marcus rode beside Elena, the metal box secured in his saddlebag. Behind them, Sarah and Rebecca kept watch, ever vigilant. Ahead, the road stretched toward a destination that promised trials and testimony in the slow, grinding machinery of justice. It would not be easy. The forces arrayed against them were powerful and entrenched, but they had truth on their side and evidence, and the determination of people who had lost everything except their integrity. As the sun rose higher, painting the New Mexico landscape in shades of gold and copper, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth that believes the world is fair and goodness always triumphs, but the harder, more mature hope that knows justice is a long war with many battles, and that showing up to fight is itself a victory. They rode toward Fort Union, toward whatever came next, together. And for Marcus Calloway, after so many years alone, that was enough. Fort Union rose from the plains like a monument to military order, its adobe walls the color of dried blood in the afternoon sun. Marcus had not seen the fort in 15 years, not since the night he fled into darkness with a price on his head. Returning now, even under military escort, sent ice through his veins. Captain Morrison noticed his tension. "You have nothing to fear, Mr. Calloway. I've sent word ahead to the commanding officer. Colonel Ashford is a man of integrity. He'll ensure you receive a fair hearing. And if powerful men decide integrity is inconvenient," Marcus asked, "then we fight them together." The captain's jaw set firmly. "I didn't join the army to protect murderers hiding behind rank. Whatever happens, the truth will be heard." The gates swung open as they approached. Soldiers lined the walls, watching the unusual procession with curious eyes. A column of dusty travelers, 3 bound prisoners, and a pregnant woman on a litter. Word had already spread through the garrison. Something significant was happening. Colonel William Ashford waited in the parade ground, a silver-haired man in his late 50s with the weathered face of someone who had spent decades on the frontier. His uniform was immaculate, medals earned in wars both foreign and domestic glinting on his chest. But his eyes held something Marcus hadn't expected. Sadness, as if he already knew what was coming and mourned it. "Mr. Calloway," the colonel's voice was gravelly but clear. "Captain Morrison has briefed me on the situation. I understand you have evidence of serious crimes committed under military authority." "Yes, sir." Marcus dismounted, retrieving the metal box from his saddlebag. "Major William Morgan's personal records. 23 operations conducted between 1862 and 1863. All officially reported as engagements against hostile warriors. The truth is quite different." Ashford took the box, his hand steady despite the weight of what it represented. "These are serious allegations. Do you understand that opening this investigation will have far-reaching consequences? Men of high rank will be implicated. Political careers may be destroyed. The Army's reputation will suffer." "I understand, sir, but the alternative is allowing mass murder to remain hidden, letting the guilty walk free while their victims stay forgotten." The colonel met his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we proceed. Captain Morrison, confine the prisoners separately. Post guards on each. No visitors without my explicit authorization." He turned to Marcus and the women. "You'll be given quarters in the guest barracks. Tomorrow morning, we begin formal depositions." Elena stepped forward. "And Clara? She needs a doctor immediately." Ashford's expression softened. "Our post surgeon is competent. He'll see to her right away." He gestured to 2 soldiers. "Escort these ladies to the infirmary, then the guest quarters. Ensure they have everything they need." As the women were led away, Elena looked back at Marcus, a question in her eyes. "Will you be all right?" Marcus nodded, though uncertainty churned in his gut. "I'll find you after I'm settled." The guest quarters were sparse but clean. A single room with a cot, a wash basin, and a small window overlooking the parade ground. Marcus sat on the cot, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained him through days of running and fighting finally drained away, leaving him hollow. A knock at the door. Captain Morrison entered, carrying a bottle and 2 glasses. "Thought you might need this." He poured amber liquid into both glasses, handed one to Marcus. "Kentucky bourbon. Not regulation, but I've found regulations don't always account for reality." Marcus took a sip, felt the burn slide down his throat. "Thank you for believing us, for bringing us here safely." "Don't thank me yet." Morrison settled into the room's only chair. "The fight's just beginning. Colonel Pierce has powerful friends. Even with the evidence, this won't be a simple matter of justice. You think they'll try to suppress it? I think they'll try everything. Discredit you as a deserter. Paint the women as unreliable witnesses. Claim the journal is fabricated. They'll attack from every angle because they have to. If this evidence stands, it doesn't just damn Briggs and Morgan. It exposes a system that allowed and encouraged these actions." Marcus stared into his glass. "Then why did you help us? If you knew it would be this complicated?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. "My father was Cheyenne. My mother, a settler's daughter who fell in love with the wrong man according to her family. I grew up between two worlds, accepted by neither. When I joined the Army, I thought I could be a bridge, prove that honor and duty transcended race. But I've seen too many men like Briggs and Pierce, men who use duty as an excuse for cruelty. He met Marcus's eyes. This is my chance to prove that honor still means something. The next morning, depositions began in the fort's administrative building. Colonel Ashford presided, flanked by two other officers Marcus didn't recognize. A clerk sat ready to transcribe everything. Captain Morrison stood as official observer, ensuring protocol was followed. Marcus testified first. For 4 hours, he recounted everything. His service as a scout, the operations he guided, Cedar Valley in excruciating detail, his confrontation with Major Morgan, the flight into the desert, 15 years of exile. He spoke names when he knew them, described faces when he didn't. He admitted his own complicity, his own failures, holding nothing back. When he described the woman and child at Cedar Valley, Catherine and Anna Ravenswood, his voice cracked. But he forced himself to continue. They deserved to be remembered as more than entries in a false ledger. The officers listened in grim silence. The clerk's pen scratched across paper, recording words that would become official testimony. When Marcus finished, Ashford spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway. That was clearly difficult. Now I must ask, are you prepared to testify to all of this under oath at a formal court-martial, knowing that you may also face charges for desertion and abandonment of troops?" "I am, sir. Whatever punishment I deserve, I'll accept. But the truth has to come out." Elena testified next. She described her life before Cedar Valley. Her sister Catherine, a talented weaver who sang while she worked. Her niece Anna, bright and curious, who loved collecting smooth stones from the creek. She described the day she learned they were dead, the hollow grief that followed, the years of wondering if she could have saved them somehow. Then she testified about the attack on her own camp, her husband's murder, the discovery that it was all connected to Morgan's box, her journey with Marcus, watching him struggle between self-preservation and doing what was right. "He could have abandoned us a dozen times," she said clearly. "Every moment we slowed him down, put him in danger. But he stayed, not because he had to, because he chose to. That choice doesn't erase what he did 15 years ago, but it shows he spent those years becoming someone different, someone better." Sarah's testimony was harsher. She spoke of her husband and 2 children, murdered in the attack. She described finding their bodies, the rage and grief that nearly destroyed her. She admitted that she had wanted Marcus dead when she first saw his cavalry badge, that only Elena's intervention had stopped her. "But I was wrong," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Not about the anger. That's righteous and earned. But about Marcus. He's not the same man who stood silent at Cedar Valley. And if he can change, if he can find redemption through action, then maybe there's hope for all of us." Rebecca testified about Clara's condition, the deliberate wounds meant to slow them down. She described Jacob Running Deer's betrayal and final redemption. She spoke of Daniel Hawthorne's sacrifice, a man she'd never met but whose death had given them the chance to reach Fort Union. Finally, Clara testified from a wheelchair, still too weak to stand for long. The post surgeon sat nearby, ready to intervene if she showed signs of distress. She spoke quietly but clearly about Thomas finding the box, his plans to report it, Jacob's betrayal, the attack that stole everything. "My husband believed in justice," she said. "He believed good people would do the right thing if they knew the truth. I have to believe he was right. Otherwise, what did he die for?" When the depositions ended, Ashford ordered the box opened and its contents examined. The journal was read aloud, every operation detailed. The photographs were cataloged and described for the record. The lists of names were verified against military records. The evidence was damning, undeniable. Even officers predisposed to doubt seemed shaken by the scope of what Morgan had documented. But as Captain Morrison had warned, the fight was far from over. That evening, a telegram arrived from Washington. 3 senators and 2 generals demanded the investigation be suspended pending review by a special committee. They questioned the authenticity of the evidence. They suggested Marcus and the Apache women had fabricated everything to seek revenge against the Army. Colonel Ashford read the telegram to his assembled officers, then set it aside. "Gentlemen, this investigation will continue. Whatever pressure comes from Washington, whatever threats are made, we will see this through to its conclusion. The Army's honor demands no less. But not all officers agreed. During the night, someone attempted to break into the vault where Morgan's box was secured. The guard fought off the intruder, but the message was clear. Forces were working to destroy the evidence. Colonel Pierce, released on his own recognizance due to his former rank, disappeared from Fort Union. Captain Morrison suspected he had fled to Washington to coordinate the defense of everyone implicated. And Briggs, confined in the stockade, began receiving visits from a civilian lawyer who arrived from Santa Fe with impressive credentials and no explanation of who was paying his fees. Marcus watched these developments with growing unease. He met with Elena in the evening, walking the fort's perimeter as the sun set. "They're going to bury this," he said quietly. "Too many powerful men have too much to lose." Elena was silent for a moment, watching the desert turn purple in the fading light. "Maybe, but they can't unspeak our words. The depositions are official records now. Copies have been made and sent to multiple locations. Even if they suppress the trial, the testimony exists. Someday someone will read it and know the truth. Someday isn't justice for your sister, for Anna, for all of them. No, but it's something." Elena stopped walking, turned to face him. "Marcus, I've spent 15 years carrying grief and rage. I thought justice meant punishment, seeing the guilty suffer as we suffered. But I'm starting to understand it's more complicated. Justice is also about truth, about making sure the dead are remembered as people, not numbers, about preventing future atrocities by exposing past ones. Maybe we won't see Briggs hang. Maybe Pierce and the others will escape consequences. But we've already won something important." "What?" "We've refused to let them make us forget. We've refused to let their lies stand unchallenged. That's a kind of victory, even if it's not the one we wanted." Marcus felt something shift inside him, a weight he'd carried for 15 years growing slightly lighter. "You're a remarkable woman, Elena Ravenswood." She smiled faintly. "I'm a survivor, like you, like Sarah and Rebecca and Clara. We do what we must to keep living, to keep hoping, because the alternative is letting them win completely." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stood at his window, watching the fort's night watch make their rounds. Somewhere in the stockade, Briggs sat in darkness, awaiting a trial that might never come. Somewhere in Washington, powerful men schemed to protect themselves. Somewhere across the territory, families like Elena's tried to survive in a world that saw them as obstacles to progress. The scale of injustice felt overwhelming. What difference could one man's testimony make against such entrenched power? A knock at his door. Captain Morrison entered, his face grave. "We have a problem. The post surgeon examined Briggs tonight. The wound in his side is infected, spreading fast. He's burning with fever, delirious. He may not survive the week." Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions: relief that his enemy might die, frustration that Briggs might escape justice, and underneath it all, an unexpected trace of pity. Can the surgeon save him? He's trying, but Briggs is refusing treatment. Says he deserves to die for what he's done. Marcus stared at the captain. "What?" "The infection has broken him somehow, made him face things he spent years denying. He's been talking, rambling really, about Cedar Valley and the other operations, about children he killed, families he destroyed. The surgeon says it's the fever talking, but it sounds like confession to me. I want to see him." Morrison hesitated. "I'm not sure that's wise. I need to see him. Please." The stockade was cold and dark, lit only by oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on stone walls. Briggs lay on a cot in the isolation cell, his skin gray and slick with sweat. The infected wound in his side wept pus, despite the surgeon's attempts to clean it. His eyes opened when Marcus entered, focusing with difficulty. "Calloway." His voice was a hoarse whisper. "Come to watch me die." Marcus pulled up a stool, sat where Briggs could see him without effort. "I came to understand why you did it. All of it. The massacres. The cover-up. 15 years of hunting me." Briggs laughed weakly, the sound turning into a wet cough. "You want understanding? From a dying man?" "Daniel said you were more than just a murderer, that you started as a soldier trying to do his duty. I want to know when that changed, when you became something else. Briggs was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was distant, lost in memory. Cedar Valley. That's when it changed. We'd done operations before, quick strikes, mostly against warriors. Hard, but justifiable. But Cedar Valley was different. So many women, so many children. I could see they weren't a threat, but Morgan gave the order, and I followed it because that's what soldiers do. They follow orders. He coughed again, pain spasming across his face. Afterwards, I told myself it was necessary, that they would have grown up to be warriors, to be threats. I built a whole fortress of justifications in my mind, and the more I killed, the stronger that fortress became. Because if I admitted the truth, if I acknowledged what I'd really done, I'd have to face the monster I'd become. And when I left you in the desert, Briggs's eyes found Marcus. That's when the last piece of my humanity died. We were starving, dying of thirst. Morrison suggested we eat the corpses. I said no at first. But when Morgan died, when I was so desperate I couldn't think straight, I did it. We all did. And after that, there was no going back. I wasn't a man anymore, just a thing that survived by consuming others. Marcus felt sick, but forced himself to listen. When we made it back to Fort Union, I had two choices: confess what we'd done and hang for it, or lie and live. I chose to live. And every day after that was just another lie stacked on top of the first one. Hunting you became about protecting those lies. If you exposed the truth, my entire existence would be revealed as worthless, evil. And now I'm dying anyway. And all those lies feel very small and meaningless. Briggs's breath rattled. I can't undo what I did. Can't bring back the dead. Can't erase the evil. But maybe I can stop it from spreading further. What do you mean? There's a ledger, hidden in my quarters in Santa Fe. Contains names of everyone involved in the land scheme. Pierce and his associates. The senators taking bribes. The generals who authorized operations in exchange for mining rights. Everything you need to destroy the whole corrupt system. Why tell me this now? Because Daniel was right. The truth does matter. Not for my redemption, I'm beyond that. But maybe it can prevent future Cedar Valleys. Maybe some good can come from all this evil. Marcus leaned forward. Where exactly is this ledger? Briggs gave detailed instructions, his voice growing weaker. When he finished, he closed his eyes. Will you tell them, the women, what I said? I'll tell them you confessed, that you gave us information to help the case. Whether that means anything to them, I can't say. It shouldn't. I don't deserve forgiveness. Just wanted you to know that somewhere, buried under all the monster, there was still a tiny piece of the man I used to be. Enough to do one decent thing before the end. Briggs died 3 hours later, the infection claiming him before dawn. Marcus sat with him until the end, bearing witness to the death of a man who had been both villain and victim of a system that turned soldiers into murderers. The old voice spoke again, Marcus at 75 looking back. I learned something important that night. Evil isn't always born fully formed. Sometimes it grows slowly, fed by small compromises and convenient justifications. Briggs started as a soldier following orders. Each order pushed him a little further from his humanity, until one day he looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the reflection. Understanding that didn't excuse his crimes. But it taught me that the line between good and evil isn't as clear as we want to believe, and that staying human requires constant vigilance against our own capacity for darkness. In the morning, Marcus reported Briggs's death and the information about the ledger to Colonel Ashford. A squad was dispatched to Santa Fe immediately. Elena found Marcus in the fort's small chapel, sitting alone in the quiet. I heard about Briggs, she said softly, sitting beside him. He confessed. At the end, gave us information that might bring down everyone involved in the conspiracy. Does that change how you feel about him? Marcus considered the question. I don't forgive him. What he did was monstrous. But I understand him a little better now, and I pity him. He spent 15 years running from his own humanity, and it destroyed him from the inside. Elena nodded slowly. My sister used to say that hatred is a fire. It can keep you warm when everything else is cold. But if you're not careful, it burns up everything inside you until there's nothing left but ash. They sat together in silence as morning light streamed through the chapel windows, painting the simple room in shades of gold. Outside, the fort came to life with the sounds of soldiers drilling, horses whinnying, the everyday rhythms of military life continuing despite the upheaval. The fight was far from over. The trial would be long and difficult. Powerful enemies still worked to suppress the truth. But sitting here with Elena, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years. Peace, not the peace of resolution, but the peace of knowing he was finally on the right path. Whatever came next, he would face it not alone, but surrounded by people who had become family through shared struggle and mutual respect. That was enough. For now, it was enough. The ledger arrived from Santa Fe 3 days after Briggs's death, recovered exactly where he had described. It was bound in dark green leather, pages filled with meticulous accounting that chronicled corruption on a scale that shocked even Colonel Ashford. Names, dates, amounts paid in bribes, mining claims fraudulently acquired, railroad routes approved through illegally cleared land. And at the center of it all, a network of military officers, politicians, and businessmen who had grown rich on Apache blood. Ashford convened an emergency meeting with his senior officers. Marcus and Captain Morrison were invited to attend. The colonel's face was gray as he addressed the assembled men. "Gentlemen, this evidence presents us with a crisis. If we proceed with full prosecution, we will be declaring war on some of the most powerful men in the territory and in Washington. They will fight back with every resource at their disposal. Careers will be destroyed, possibly including our own." He paused, looking each man in the eye. "However, if we suppress this evidence or limit the scope of prosecution, we become complicit in the very crimes we're investigating. We betray every principle the uniform is supposed to represent. So I'm asking each of you, what is our duty here?" The silence stretched long. Finally, a major spoke up, an older man with 30 years of service. "Sir, with respect, maybe there's a middle path. We prosecute the worst offenders like Briggs and Morgan. We make an example of them, but we don't have to tear down the entire system. Some of these men, they were just following the culture of the time, doing what everyone else was doing." Captain Morrison stood abruptly. "Following the culture? Sir, that culture murdered 800 innocent people. If we only punish the foot soldiers while letting the architects walk free, we're saying their lives didn't matter. We're saying power places you above justice." The room erupted in argument. Voices rose, accusations flew. Some officers genuinely believed in limiting the investigation to preserve institutional stability. Others argued passionately for full prosecution, regardless of consequences. The divide wasn't between good men and bad, but between those who valued order and those who valued truth. Marcus watched it all with growing despair. This was how injustice survived. Not through evil conspiracies, but through reasonable men making reasonable compromises that added up to moral failure. Finally, Colonel Ashford raised his hand for silence. "Enough, I've made my decision. We prosecute everyone the evidence implicates, no matter how high their rank or how powerful their connections. If that costs me my career, so be it. I'd rather retire in disgrace than live as a man who chose convenience over conscience." He looked directly at the major who had suggested compromise. "And to those who think we should protect the system, I say this. A system that enables mass murder doesn't deserve protection. It deserves to be torn down and rebuilt on firmer foundations. That's our duty, not to the army as it is, but to what it should be." The words should have been reassuring, but Marcus saw the faces of officers who disagreed, who would work behind the scenes to undermine the investigation. The fight was moving from the stockade to the halls of power, and the outcome was far from certain. That evening, Marcus found Elena in the guest quarters helping Clara care for her newborn son. The baby had come early, small but healthy, with a powerful cry that echoed through the barracks. Clara had named him Thomas, after his father, a legacy of love in the midst of so much death. Elena looked up as Marcus entered, reading trouble in his expression immediately. "What's happened?" "Opposition, even among the officers who should be our allies. Some want to limit the investigation, prosecute a few scapegoats, and let the powerful ones escape." Elena's jaw tightened. "After everything we've testified to? After all the evidence? They're afraid of Washington's response, of destabilizing the army, of their own careers." Marcus sat heavily on a wooden chair. "I'm starting to wonder if Daniel and Jacob died for nothing. if the truth will ever actually matter. Clara looked up from her baby, her voice stronger than it had been in days. It matters to Thomas. When he's old enough to understand, I'll tell him his father died trying to do the right thing. That legacy matters, even if the powerful escape justice. But it's not enough, Sarah said from the doorway. She'd been listening. Legacies don't feed children or rebuild burned villages. Justice does. Accountability does. And if the army won't provide it, maybe we need to find another way. What are you suggesting? Rebecca asked, concerned. I'm saying we have options. We could take the evidence to newspapers, make it public before they can suppress it. Let the court of public opinion force their hand. Captain Morrison appeared behind Sarah. I wouldn't recommend that, not yet. If we go public prematurely, they'll claim it's fabricated. They'll destroy our credibility before we can build a legal case. We need the military tribunal to validate the evidence first. Then we can release it widely. And if the tribunal is rigged, Sarah challenged, if they've already decided to protect their own, then we fight that battle when it comes. But we fight it smart, not reckless. The debate continued long into the night. Strategy and counter-strategy, risks and contingencies. Marcus listened, struck by how much these women had grown in strength and tactical thinking. They weren't victims anymore. They were warriors in a different kind of battle. The next morning brought devastating news. Colonel Pierce had returned to Fort Union, accompanied by 2 federal marshals and a judge from the territorial court. They carried documents from Washington ordering the immediate cessation of the military investigation and transfer of all evidence to civilian authorities. Colonel Ashford read the documents with barely controlled fury. This is a jurisdictional maneuver. They're taking it out of my hands before I can convene the court-martial. Captain Morrison studied the paperwork. Can they do this? Override military authority. If the judge rules that the crimes were committed against civilians by men acting outside military orders, yes, the civilian court can claim primary jurisdiction, and civilian courts can be bought, Marcus said bitterly. That's the whole point. Pierce stood in the colonel's office, barely concealing his satisfaction. Gentlemen, this has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. The territorial court will conduct a thorough and impartial investigation. I'm sure justice will be served. You mean justice will be buried, Elena said from the doorway. She had entered without invitation, ignoring protocol. Just like you've buried the truth for 15 years. Pierce's smile didn't waver. Miss Ravenswood, I understand you're emotional. You've suffered terrible losses. But making wild accusations against respected citizens won't bring your family back. Their names were Catherine and Anna. Elena stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. My sister loved to sing while she worked. My niece collected smooth stones from the creek. They weren't statistics or obstacles to progress. They were people. Real people with names and dreams and the right to live. Of course they were. Pierce's tone dripped false sympathy. And their deaths were tragic. But that doesn't mean we should destroy innocent men's reputations based on questionable evidence and the testimony of hostile witnesses. Hostile? Sarah moved to stand beside Elena. We're hostile because you murdered our families. Because you profit from our land while our children's bones fertilize your crops. The federal marshals moved forward, hands on their weapons. Pierce raised a calming hand. Ladies, please. Violence won't help your cause. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have official business to conduct. He turned back to Ashford. Colonel, I'll need Morgan's box, Briggs's ledger, and all testimony transcripts. The civilian investigation begins immediately. Ashford's knuckles were white as he gripped his desk. And if I refuse to hand over evidence that's rightfully under military jurisdiction, then you'll be in contempt of a federal court order. The judge's voice was cold. I can have you arrested, Colonel. Is that really how you want to end a distinguished career? Marcus watched the confrontation with growing desperation. This was it, the moment where institutional power crushed individual conscience, where rules and procedures became weapons to protect the guilty. But then Clara spoke up, her voice carrying despite its softness. You can take the evidence. You can control the courts. You can buy judges and silence witnesses. But you can't stop the truth from spreading. She held up her baby son, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. This is Thomas Whitestone, Jr., named for his father, who died trying to expose your crimes. When he grows up, I'll tell him everything. Every name, every date, every detail. And he'll tell his children, and they'll tell theirs. You can delay justice, Colonel Pierce. You can escape it in your lifetime. But history remembers, and history judges. The room fell silent. Pierce's smile finally faded. You're a foolish woman clinging to foolish hope. History is written by the winners. And we've already won. He collected the evidence, supervised by the marshals and the territorial judge. Morgan's box, Briggs's ledger, all the carefully documented proof of systematic atrocity, placed in a wagon and driven away under armed guard. Colonel Ashford stood at his window, watching them leave. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I've failed you all. No, Marcus replied. You tried. In a corrupted system, that's not failure. That's courage. But Elena's face was stricken. She had allowed herself to hope, to believe that truth and evidence might actually matter. Watching that evidence disappear felt like watching her sister die all over again. That night, despair settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Sarah paced angrily, talking about taking direct action, about finding Pierce, and making him pay in blood what he wouldn't pay in court. Rebecca tried to calm her, speaking of long-term strategies and patience. Clara held her baby and cried silently. Elena sat alone in the chapel, staring at nothing. Marcus found her there, sat beside her in the quiet darkness. I'm sorry, he said. I promised you justice. I failed. You didn't fail. The system failed. Elena's voice was hollow. Catherine used to tell me that the world was basically good, that righteousness would prevail if we just held on to our principles. But she was wrong. Goodness doesn't prevail. Power does. I don't believe that. Why not? Look around, Marcus. Pierce walks free. The guilty remain protected. The dead stay forgotten. Where is the goodness in that? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, searching for words that might carry weight against such deep despair. The goodness is in what we did, he finally said. Not in the outcome, but in the trying. We told the truth knowing it might cost us everything. We bore witness when silence would have been safer. We refused to let them make their victims disappear. That matters, Elena. Even if we never see justice, what we did matters. Does it? Or is it just comfort for the powerless, telling ourselves our suffering has meaning when it doesn't? Before Marcus could answer, Captain Morrison burst into the chapel, his face urgent. You need to see this. Now. They followed him to the telegraph office where the night operator stood holding a message with shaking hands. Morrison took it, read it aloud. It's from Washington, from the Office of the Secretary of War. Pierce's civilian investigation has been overruled. The evidence has been ordered returned to Fort Union immediately for military tribunal. 3 officers from the Judge Advocate General's office are en route to conduct the prosecution. Full court-martial proceedings to begin in 2 weeks. How? Elena breathed. How did this happen? Morrison handed her a second telegram. Someone in Washington received copies of our depositions, read them, was moved by them, and that someone has more power than Pierce's allies. The second telegram was signed by a senator Marcus had never heard of, a reformer known for fighting corruption. It thanked them for their courage and promised that their testimony would not be silenced. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. Someone heard us. Someone actually listened. Elena read the telegram again, her hands trembling. Catherine, Anna, all of them. They're going to be remembered. Their names are going to be spoken in official proceedings. They're going to matter. Sarah appeared in the doorway, Rebecca and Clara behind her. Sarah's face showed cautious hope, afraid to believe. Is this real or another trick? Captain Morrison smiled genuinely for the first time in days. It's real. The Secretary of War doesn't involve himself in minor matters. This investigation has the highest level of authority. Pierce and his friends can't stop it now. The women looked at each other, exhaustion and hope mixing in their expressions. They had traveled so far, lost so much, fought through despair that would have broken lesser people. And finally, impossibly, they were being heard. Clara hugged her baby close. Your grandfather was a good man, Thomas. A hero. And now the world is going to know it. The old voice spoke again, Marcus at 75, looking back. That was the darkest hour. The moment when everything seemed lost and hope felt like a cruel illusion. But we learned something vital in that darkness. We learned that speaking truth matters even when it seems futile, because you never know who's listening. You never know whose heart might be moved by your testimony. We almost gave up, almost surrendered to despair, but we held on just long enough for help to arrive. That's the lesson I've carried ever since. Hold on. Keep speaking. Keep bearing witness, because justice delayed is not always justice denied. In the days that followed, Fort Union transformed into the center of the most significant military trial in decades. Officers arrived from across the territory. Journalists appeared, sensing a major story. The guest quarters filled with witnesses being called to testify. Colonel Pierce tried to flee but was arrested at the Santa Fe depot. Red Morrison and Cole Webster were transferred back into military custody. The names in Briggs's ledger, civilian and military alike, found themselves facing investigation. Marcus, Elena, Sarah, Rebecca, and Clara prepared to testify again, this time before a tribunal that had the power and authority to deliver real justice. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time since finding that burned Apache camp, Marcus believed they might actually win. He stood with Elena on the fort's walls at sunset, watching the desert turn shades of purple and gold. "Whatever happens at trial," she said quietly, "we've already achieved something important." "What's that?" "We've proven that ordinary people can stand up to extraordinary power. That truth spoken with courage can move mountains, even if it takes time. That's a victory, regardless of the verdicts." Marcus took her hand, felt her squeeze back. "Your sister would be proud of you." Elena smiled through tears. "I hope so. I hope wherever she is, she knows we didn't let them forget her." They stood together as night fell, two survivors among many, warriors in a war fought with words and truth instead of weapons. Behind them, the fort buzzed with activity as preparations continued for the trial that would finally, definitively, determine whether justice was more than just a word people spoke while doing nothing. The darkest hour had passed. Now came the reckoning. The court-martial convened on a cold November morning, 3 weeks after the Secretary of War's intervention. The proceedings took place in Fort Union's largest assembly hall, hastily converted into a courtroom with rows of benches for observers and a raised platform for the tribunal judges. 3 senior officers from the Judge Advocate General's office presided, their faces stern and impartial. They had been chosen specifically because they had no prior connection to anyone involved, no loyalties that might compromise their judgment. The gallery filled with journalists, fellow officers, and curious civilians who had traveled from across the territory. Word had spread that this trial would expose corruption at the highest levels. Everyone wanted to witness history being made. Marcus sat in the front row beside Elena, Sarah, Rebecca, and Clara, who held baby Thomas in her arms. Captain Morrison sat with them, having been granted leave to attend as a witness. Behind them, the whispers of spectators created a low buzz of anticipation. The lead prosecutor was Major Theodore Walsh, a severe man in his 50s with a reputation for uncompromising integrity. He had spent 2 weeks reviewing every piece of evidence, every deposition, preparing a case so airtight that even the most skillful defense couldn't slip through its gaps. Colonel Pierce sat at the defense table with his expensive lawyer, a slick-tongued man from Philadelphia who had defended senators and railroad barons. Red Morrison and Cole Webster sat separately, each with their own counsel. The territorial judge who had tried to intervene sat in the gallery, his authority revoked by federal order. The presiding judge, a brigadier general named Harrison, called the proceedings to order. This court-martial is convened to investigate allegations of war crimes, conspiracy to commit murder, corruption, and abuse of military authority. The charges are serious, the evidence substantial, justice will be served, regardless of rank or influence. He looked directly at Pierce as he spoke, making clear that no amount of political connection would sway this tribunal. Major Walsh stood, his opening statement delivered with prosecutorial precision. "Gentlemen of the court, over the next days you will hear testimony that challenges your faith in the institution we serve. You will see evidence of systematic atrocity disguised as military necessity. You will learn how officers entrusted with protecting the innocent instead slaughtered them for profit. This is not a comfortable truth, but it is truth nonetheless, documented in the words of the perpetrators themselves." He held up Morgan's journal, the physical evidence that anchored everything. Major William Morgan kept meticulous records. 23 operations conducted between 1862 and 1863. 847 people killed. Every single one officially reported as a hostile warrior. The truth? 70% were women, children, and elderly. Non-combatants murdered to clear land for mining and railroad development. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Harrison gabbled for silence. Walsh continued, his voice growing stronger. And when one man, Marcus Calloway, refused to continue participating in these crimes, he was branded a deserter and hunted for 15 years. Not because he abandoned his duty, but because he threatened to expose the truth. This trial is about more than punishing individual criminals. It's about reclaiming the honor of the uniform they betrayed. The defense lawyer, a man named Hutchinson, rose with practiced smoothness. My client, Colonel Pierce, is a decorated veteran who served his country with distinction for 30 years. The prosecution would have you believe he orchestrated a vast conspiracy based on the ravings of a confessed deserter and the emotional testimony of bereaved Apache women. But where is the proof of Colonel Pierce's direct involvement? The journal belonged to Major Morgan, now conveniently dead. The ledger came from Sergeant Briggs, also dead. My client's name appears in these documents, yes, but always in the context of legitimate business transactions. Land sales, mining investments, all perfectly legal. He gestured dismissively at Marcus and the women. These witnesses have every reason to fabricate evidence. They lost family members in what they perceive as injustice. Their grief is understandable, but grief makes poor foundation for criminal conviction. The prosecution must prove beyond reasonable doubt that Colonel Pierce knowingly participated in illegal activities. I submit they cannot meet that burden. The battle lines were drawn. For 3 days, Walsh methodically presented evidence. The journal entries, each one read aloud with dates and casualty counts. The photographs displayed for the court despite their disturbing nature. The ledger with its careful accounting of bribes paid and profits distributed. Expert witnesses testified about the land deals, tracing how Apache territory became mining claims within weeks of military operations. Survivors from other camps testified about attacks similar to the one that destroyed Elena's family. A former quartermaster revealed how supplies were diverted to support operations that weren't in any official record. The cumulative weight was staggering. Then came the personal testimonies. Marcus took the stand first, recounting his entire story under oath. Hutchinson cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint him as unreliable, a deserter with a grudge. Isn't it true, Mr. Calloway, that you abandoned your unit in hostile territory? I left because I refused to participate in the murder of civilians. That's a convenient justification for cowardice, isn't it? No, it took more courage to walk away than to keep following evil orders. Evil orders? Who are you to judge military strategy? I'm someone who was there, who saw children killed because they existed on land someone wanted to steal. I don't need to be a general to know that's evil. The exchange went on for hours, but Marcus held steady, refusing to be rattled or discredited. His testimony rang with the authenticity of lived experience. Elena testified next, speaking Catherine and Anna's names into the official record, describing their lives, their dreams, their final moments. The courtroom fell silent as she spoke, the reality of individual loss cutting through abstract discussions of strategy and jurisdiction. When I close my eyes, I see my niece Anna laughing as she played by the creek. She wanted to be a healer like Rebecca. She would have grown up to help people, to make the world better. But she never got that chance because Major Morgan wanted the land her family lived on. Because Sergeant Briggs followed orders without questioning their morality. Because men like Colonel Pierce profited from their deaths and worked to hide the truth. She turned to face Pierce directly. You can't bring them back. Nothing can. But you can acknowledge what was taken. You can stop pretending their deaths were necessary or justified. You can give them the dignity of truth. Pierce met her gaze without flinching, his face a mask of controlled contempt. But something flickered in his eyes. Not quite shame, but perhaps the first crack in his armor of certainty. Sarah testified about her children, giving their names and ages, describing the specific details that made them individual people rather than statistics. Rebecca testified about the medical evidence, The deliberate wounding of Clara designed to slow their escape. Clara, still weak but determined, testified about Thomas finding the box and Jacob's betrayal. The defense tried to undermine each testimony, suggesting exaggeration or fabrication. But Walsh had prepared his witnesses well. They remained consistent, corroborated by physical evidence and contemporary documents. The turning point came on the fourth day when a surprise witness appeared, a former major who had served under Morgan and survived the desert ordeal with Briggs. He had been located by Walsh's investigators and agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. His name was Richard Thornton, and his testimony shattered the defense. Major Morgan kept two sets of records, he said, his voice steady despite obvious nervousness. One for official reports showing battles against warriors. Another, his private journal, showing the truth. I saw him write in that journal, saw him photograph the aftermath of operations. He said it was insurance, leverage against anyone who might betray him. And Colonel Pierce, Walsh prompted, what was his role? Pierce coordinated with civilian investors. He identified which land had mineral value, arranged for military operations to clear it, then facilitated the transfer of claims to his business partners. He and Morgan were partners. Morgan provided military force. Pierce provided political protection and financial distribution. The courtroom exploded. Harrison gavelled repeatedly for order. Pierce's lawyer jumped to his feet, objecting strenuously. But Thornton's testimony was too detailed, too specific to dismiss. Walsh pressed his advantage. Did Colonel Pierce know these were operations against non-combatants? He knew. He joked about it once, said Indians didn't count as real casualties, just obstacles to be removed. That statement hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. The defense called their own witnesses, trying to establish that Pierce was merely a businessman making legal investments. But Walsh destroyed their credibility on cross-examination, revealing financial connections and conflicts of interest. Morrison and Webster were offered reduced sentences if they testified against Pierce. Webster refused, maintaining loyalty to his former commander. But Morrison, faced with the certainty of conviction, broke. He described receiving orders directly from Pierce, coordinating with Morgan on operation timing, disposing of evidence, intimidating witnesses who survived earlier operations. His testimony was damning in its specificity. Pierce's lawyer made a final desperate argument in closing statements. Gentlemen, this trial is political theater designed to scapegoat one man for the sins of an entire system. Yes, operations occurred. Yes, civilians died. War is hell, as General Sherman said. But to single out Colonel Pierce, to destroy his reputation and career based on the testimony of paid informants and hostile witnesses, is miscarriage of justice. Walsh's closing was devastating in its simplicity. The defense asks you to believe this was merely war, but war has rules, laws, principles that separate soldiers from murderers. Major Morgan violated every one of those principles. Sergeant Briggs executed those violations, and Colonel Pierce profited from them while working systematically to hide the truth. 847 people died, not in battle, not in war, in massacres disguised as military operations. The evidence is overwhelming, the testimony consistent, the guilt undeniable. Justice demands accountability. The tribunal deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Journalists crowded the back, pencils ready. Marcus held Elena's hand, feeling her tremble with anticipation and fear. General Harrison stood, his face grave. This court has reviewed all evidence and testimony. We find the charges proven beyond reasonable doubt. The operations documented in Major Morgan's journal constitute war crimes under military law. The conspiracy to conceal these crimes and profit from them extends beyond the original perpetrators. He looked at Pierce. Colonel Raymond Pierce, this court finds you guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to war crimes, corruption of military authority, and obstruction of justice. You are hereby stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged from military service, and sentenced to 20 years hard labor at Fort Leavenworth. Pierce's face went white. His lawyer began objecting, but Harrison silenced him with a look. Red Morrison, you are found guilty of murder and war crimes, sentenced to hang by the neck until dead, sentenced to be carried out within 30 days. Morrison slumped in his chair, all fight gone from him. Cole Webster, guilty of the same charges. Same sentence. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Some spectators cheered, others shouted in protest. Journalists rushed for the doors to file their stories. Pierce sat frozen, unable to process that his world had just collapsed. Marcus felt Elena collapse against him, sobbing. Not tears of joy, but of release. The weight she had carried for 15 years, the burden of unavenged injustice, finally lifted. Sarah embraced Rebecca, both women crying freely. Clara held baby Thomas close, whispering to him about his grandfather's vindication. The old voice spoke one final time. Marcus at 75, looking back across the decades. Justice came slower than we wanted, incomplete in ways that still pain me. Many guilty men escaped punishment through death or political protection. The system that enabled the massacres remained largely intact. But we won something vital that day. We proved that truth spoken with courage can overcome institutional power. We gave names back to the forgotten dead. We showed that ordinary people, armed with nothing but testimony and determination, can demand accountability from the mighty. That victory, imperfect as it was, changed everything that followed. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the porch of his homestead, watching the sun set over the land that now held more life than it had in 15 years. The timber cabin had been expanded with help from Fort Union's carpenters. A second structure housed Elena, Sarah, and Rebecca. Clara and baby Thomas lived in a small cottage nearby. The garden plot Marcus had neglected now flourished under Rebecca's expert care. Corn grew tall alongside squash and beans. Chickens pecked in a new coop Sarah had built. The creek still ran clear and cold, providing water for both drinking and irrigation. It had become a community, a family forged not by blood, but by shared trauma and mutual healing. Elena joined Marcus on the porch, her hair now fully silver, but her eyes bright with something approaching peace. "Thinking about the trial?" she asked. "Thinking about everything that led to it, all the pain and loss, all the people who died before justice came. And I'm thinking that maybe Daniel was right, maybe Jacob was right. The truth does matter. Not because it brings the dead back or erases the past, but because it changes the future. That tribunal established precedent. Future officers will think twice before following orders they know are evil." Elena leaned against him, comfortable in their growing intimacy. "The territorial government formally apologized to the Apache people last week, promised reparations and land rights. It's not enough. Will never be enough. But it's something." Clara emerged from her cottage, Thomas on her hip. The baby was 6 months old now, healthy and curious about everything. She waved to them before heading to the garden where Rebecca was harvesting vegetables. Sarah appeared from the barn carrying firewood. She had softened in the months since the trial, the sharp edges of her anger blunted by time and the satisfaction of seeing justice served. She still carried her knife, still watched strangers with suspicion. But she laughed now, played with Thomas, talked about maybe, someday, trusting enough to let someone close again. "This is good," Marcus said quietly. "What we've built here." "It is," Elena smiled. Strange to think it started with such horror. That troop of women fleeing for their lives and the lonely man who couldn't turn away. "You weren't troops, you were survivors. Warriors. So were you. Still are." Marcus looked at the land, the buildings, the women who had become his family. At 75, looking back, he knew this had been the turning point. The moment his life stopped being about running from the past and started being about building a future. "I want to marry you," he said suddenly, "if you'll have me." Elena turned to look at him fully, surprise and warmth mixing in her expression. "After everything we've been through, you still feel the need to ask formally. Some traditions matter. You deserve to be properly courted, properly asked." She laughed, the sound like water over stones. "Then yes, Marcus Calloway, I'll marry you not because I need protection or provision, but because I love you, because we've earned each other through fire and testimony." They married in early spring, a simple ceremony attended by the other women, Captain Morrison, Colonel Maul Ashford, and a few officers from Fort Union. No priest or reverend, just promises spoken under open sky with the desert as witness. Life settled into rhythms, planting and harvest, meals shared around a common table, stories told on quiet evenings, baby Thomas growing strong, learning to walk, saying his first words. Sarah eventually remarried, a widowed rancher who approached her with patience and respect, earning her trust over months of quiet courtship. Rebecca became the region's unofficial doctor, her medical knowledge serving Apache and settler alike. Clara raised Thomas with stories of his father's courage, ensuring the boy knew he came from a line of men who chose principle over convenience. And Marcus, finally at peace with his past, spent his remaining years teaching Thomas and eventually other children about honor, about standing up to injustice, about the responsibility that comes with power. The old voice spoke a final benediction. I'm 75 now. The century turns and I stand at the edge of memory, looking back across a life marked by failure and redemption. I failed at Cedar Valley. That stain never fully washes away, but I succeeded in the years that followed. Not through grand gestures, but through daily choices. To stay, to speak truth, to build something good from the ashes of something terrible. Elena taught me that redemption isn't a single moment of forgiveness. It's a lifetime of living differently, of choosing, again and again, to be better than you were. We didn't save everyone. We couldn't undo the past, but we bore witness. We demanded justice. We built a life that honored the dead by serving the living. That's enough. It has to be enough, because it's all any of us can do. Remember the fallen, tell their stories, and try, every day, to build a world where such tragedies become impossible. The sun set over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Marcus Calloway, 75 years old, sat on his porch with Elena beside him, watching children play in the yard. His grandchildren now, and the children of the women who had survived impossible odds to build this improbable family. The past remained. It always would. Catherine and Anna, Thomas Whitestone, Daniel Hawthorne, Jacob Running Deer, all the countless others whose names were recorded in Morgan's terrible journal. They lived on in memory, in testimony, in the careful record of a trial that changed military law forever. But the future lived too. In baby Thomas's laughter, in the garden growing strong, in the love between survivors who had chosen to heal together rather than suffer alone. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the evening breeze on his face. When he opened them, Elena was watching him with understanding. No regrets? She asked. 1,000 regrets, but also 1,000 moments of grace. It balances, somehow. She took his hand. It does. And as darkness fell over the desert, as stars emerged one by one in the vast New Mexico sky, Marcus Calloway finally allowed himself to believe what he had spent 15 years denying. He was forgiven, not by others, though Elena's love came close, but by himself. He had done the work, paid the price, earned the right to peace. The journey from that ruined Apache camp to this moment of quiet contentment had been long and brutal, but he had made it. They all had, and that, after everything, was enough. The story ended not with triumph or tragedy, but with something rarer and more precious. Simple human peace.